All right. Well, hello, everybody. Hi, family and friends. Welcome again to our Ignite the Fire podcast, Kinikini, Come Follow Me. Um, Platform for 2026. Super excited to be together today. Again, you're getting kind of our core team members in this in our Come Follow Me. This is again, Linda, year 4 for us as a family doing Come Follow Me. I want to say it's year 4 um, because this is our first time doing the Old Testament, but it's the last of we've done all the other books as a family together. And prior to this year, we were doing early morning, Monday through Friday, from 6:30 to 7:30. Come follow me. Readings and it was wonderful. We made the decision to kind of change it up a little, and now are doing these podcasts. So we're doing weekly podcasts on the readings for the week, and it has been great. We've had the opportunity to hear from recent returned missionaries from our family. My son, who is currently serving, and then last week we got to hear from a whole family, or kind of family members. It was Ofan Talautonga with one of their daughters and one of their sons. And so tonight, we're doing a sister episode, and so I'm so excited to have Linda join me tonight. So. Linda, I feel like we've introduced ourselves a couple of times because we've done this a few times, but if you want to just share a little bit about yourself, or maybe how your family's doing right now, because there is a lot going on with your family. You want to share, and then we will dive into our readings this week.
Yeah, well, I'm from Deni Nesita's line, married to the youngest in the family, Lyle Kinikini. Our 8 children are doing well. Our youngest is currently serving in the Papua New Guinea mission, the Port Moresby mission right now. They're getting ready to split the mission, probably effective in July. But my son was recently transferred to a new area. He'd been serving in the same area for 7.5 months. He was in the office for 7.5 months and finally was transferred out to a new area. And had only been there a week when they extended the calling to him to be a branch president. And so that is where he is currently serving out there in Port Moresby. And so we send a lot of prayers his way. He did send a beautiful message out in his email regarding being called to the work. And it was just a tender reminder that there is a lot of work to be done. Um, and that if we are willing, the Lord will call us to serve in various parts of the vineyard. And it doesn't even have to be a formal calling. He has a lot of work. So wherever he asks us to be, the invitation by my son was just to step into it and put our trust in the Lord. So
Yeah.
we're grateful for his willingness to do that. He thought he was going to catch a break. Uh, I,
Right.
that's not the case. And so and I feel like that is uh I feel like that's an ongoing theme as we are as the Lord's work is hastening, you know. We think that things will get easier when in fact they're getting harder. Um, and it's to be expected, but it's always still a surprise, when it happens. So it'll be interesting to unfold and unpack the readings this week, because I think they kind of speak to some of those challenges that are very prevalent in our current day. So, anyhow,
Yeah,
that's
yeah, thank you so much. And I read his sweet letter, and like you said, he talks a lot about um, when we're called to the work, the Lord, um, he qualifies us, right? And that's such a beautiful theme, specifically this week, as we learn the two stories that we really focus on in this week's readings is about doing hard things and how does the Lord help us overcome whatever those hardships are, and qualifying us in doing that work. So as we see kind of that modern day ask in your son, it reminds us of those kind of asks that were given to those in the Old Testament, right? And so this week's readings is from Genesis 6, chapter 6 through 11, and Moses 8. And the title is Noah Found Grace in the Eyes of the Lord. And, I think about your son and the things that he has been asked to do on his mission, and how so many of our missionaries are asked to do things, and how God gives grace so that they can fulfill those purposes, things that are beyond what they thought they could do on their own, right? So this is pretty amazing, and I'd like us to go ahead and start by just reading the very introduction, the first two paragraphs, that will kind of lead us into these two main stories that we'll get the opportunity to talk about. Linda, do you mind reading those two paragraphs for us?
Sure. Living in the latter days, we have special reason to pay attention to the story of the flood. When Jesus Christ taught how we should watch for his second coming, he said, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be also at the coming of the Son of Man." In addition, words that describe Noah's day, like corrupt and filled with violence, could just as easily describe our time. The story of the Tower of Babel also feels applicable to our day, with its description of pride, followed by confusion and then division. These ancient accounts are valuable not just because they show us that wickedness repeats itself throughout history. More important, they teach us what to do about it. Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and the families of Jared and his brother turned to the Lord and were protected from the confusion and division in Babel. If we wonder how to keep ourselves and our families safe during corruption and violence, the stories in these chapters have much to teach us.
Yeah.
That's
Um,
so
what are
good.
isn't that good? What are your thoughts about recognizing that even God compares what happened, the state of the people in Noah's time to our time as we prepare for the coming of Jesus Christ? What does that tell you, or how does that make you feel, recognizing, knowing the story of Noah? What happens? Um, what are we prepared? What are we kind of in the midst of, in our time right now?
Right. I mean, first off, I think what a tender mercy that the Lord would provide um really these revelations. You know what I mean? You have these stories and you read these stories over and over again, but with every succeeding year, you know what I mean, as we grow and see new things in the things that we're reading, I'm always amazed at what more there is to learn from a story that we've read hundreds of times, right? And so I feel a sense of comfort in knowing that if we unpack this story with that lens, right, that he provides us, uh, we will find things that would be applicable to us today, which is really comforting when you realize, you know, these people were quite corrupt and filled with violence. Um, it is a repetition of the wickedness that happened back then. We see a lot of that today. The Tower of Babel, the confusion, the division that's taking place. And it makes me want to really unpack, take a closer look at these stories to see what gems are there for us to apply to our daily lives. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And the reality is, when I first learned these stories, right, when I was younger, I'm 50, I'm 58, right? So we're talking 50 years ago when I was 8 years old, when I was in primary and then even in youth. These stories were really like very foreign. I was like, oh my gosh, how could the world be that wicked that God needed to flood it? How could people be that violent, right? That was 50 years ago. I hear this story today and it's 100% real to me.
Right.
Like it's not hard for me to envision that world because I live in it, right? We see that kind of violence. We see that kind of of hatred, of being a place that has forgotten God, and we're in it.
Right.
And that in 50 years is not a long time. It's my lifetime. It's my lifetime that I have seen that change. And so now it's very personal to me to know that in the midst of that violence, that wickedness, in a world that is so divided, right? Politically divided, every kind of division we could possibly see, that God has grace and saves those that love him and that follow him, right? Um, whether it be Noah's family or Jared's family, if we pray, we plead for him, we find grace in him. He's like, I will succor you and I will keep you safe, right? Um, that brings me a lot of peace and encouragement. But again, I can't believe that I can now see that world. When I was little, I couldn't see it, even as a teenager or even young adult, right? But now I'm like, I get that world now, which is scary, right? But amazing to me. And like you said, when we talk about packing, unpacking it, um, that's the personal piece that for me brings me a lot of peace. And I'm excited for us to kind of dive into that. One of the section talks about the flood was truly an act of God's mercy, right? Because and it says some people wonder about the justice of God in sending the flood to destroy man, which is talked about in Genesis chapter 6 verse 7. But Elder Neil A. Maxwell actually gives some amazing clarity, because it's not found in the Bible. And I'm going to just read what it says there. So in Genesis chapter 6, verse 7, it says, and the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. It's interesting that it uses the word that it repenteth him. And there's not even a definition, because I was like searching. I'm like, what does that mean? Why does it repenteth him? And so I had to go by my own interpretation. And I think it means that it brought him sorrow, that he sees his people, that he created this earth, that he created so that they could live the plan of salvation and have an opportunity to have agency and grow. Yet they use their agency to absolutely not follow him, right? And because of that, he makes the decision to destroy the earth and the people that he loved, because they chose not to follow him. And this is what Neil A. Maxwell says. Neil A. Maxwell explained that at the time of the flood, corruption had reached an agency destroying point that spirits could not in justice be sent here. Linda, what do you think? I mean, and I love Elder Maxwell. Boy, he was so articulate and clear that it's not because God didn't want us. He didn't destroy us because he was angry, but it was the people were living in such a way that the corruption had reached an agency destroying point that spirits could not in justice be able to be sent here. He knew that there was no way they could truly utilize their agency, because there was no place for righteousness to be present on earth. What are your thoughts about that?
Um, Yeah, it, you know, well, first, um, the fact that God would feel so much pain, you know what I mean, and sorrow at the wickedness of his children. Um, uh, it reminds me a lot of, and I don't know that we talk about this often, but of the suffering God, of the suffering, Savior. We see him go into the Garden of Gethsemane. We see him, on the cross. We understand that there's a lot of things that transpire there that create a lot of pain and suffering, and yet he takes it all on. um uh Yet he hasn't come yet, you know here. And so I don't necessarily know that I have any answers. I think I have more questions than I do answers, about this particular part. um but I also know that in the pre-existence, agency was a vital part of our growth.
Right.
um and when it gets to a point where it's an agency destroying point,
Yeah.
right? Then there's this intervention that needs to take place. Otherwise, um it it frustrates the plan,
Yeah.
right? And there has to be that agency. You have to be able to make choices, to choose, you
Right.
know. Um, and I wonder, how close we are to that agency destroying point ourselves, right?
Exactly. Right. Right. You
And
know,
so, yeah.
yeah. And it's not surprising because we're getting closer to that second coming of Christ. And it's like, um, and going back to the flood, right? And so I just wanted to read a couple more verses if you don't mind. In
Yes.
Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, he actually first says, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So again, God was being really mindful. He wasn't just going, they're being bad, I'm done. He was observing and seeing that it gotten past feeling, right? That the wickedness on the earth was continuous. It was overarchingly wicked out of their own choices, right? I mean, unfortunately, right? His children made the choice to get to that point. And then he talks about, and then in verse 11 and 12, it says, the earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted his way upon the earth. So not only were the people corrupt, but the earth, I think about, kind of like pollution. Like we've gotten to the point where the earth was no longer producing good things because of the violence, and I could, you see that. And like when people are to that point, they don't take care of anything. They destroy the things that are around them, that even the earth. So all of the things that he had created had gotten to a state where it was not producing goodness, right? And so he makes the choice to flood the earth. But what's beautiful about the flood, it wasn't the end, right? It allows an opportunity to be cleansed and become renewed, right? That's the joy, that even though it's devastating, 100%, right? Everyone that was on the earth dies, everything is gone, but it was the only way we could then be renewed, right? That then once the flood goes down, Noah gets off the ark with his family and all of the animals, all the seeds, everything, to start anew. Like again, I love God didn't give up on us. He just recognized that he had to, like you said, he had to put in an intervention to create a space for all his children to progress. And 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 we do that ourselves, right? I loved, I don't know if you at when Roman was preparing to get baptized. And Roman is Ofa and Thalau's grandson. He's 10 years old. His mom is not a member, and so he didn't get baptized. And Lyle is basically his adopted dad. Is what he, and a surrogate dad. But anyway, he had the opportunity to be taught. He was getting taught for about a year and a half, and he was brought up Muslim, but then decided that he wanted to learn more about the gospel because he sees his sisters go to church and those kind of things. And so he finally, after a year and a half, made the decision to be baptized. And his baptism was that just last week? Oh my gosh, I think it was just last Saturday. And it was beautiful. But when they were preparing, like he had said yes to getting baptized, and they kind of prepare them for their interview with the district leader, right? And so the sisters were talking to him and just kind of reviewing his thoughts about being baptized. And they asked him, they said, "Hey, why? What is baptism to you? Why do you think it's important to get baptized?" And this was his answer. He said, "Well, God made us from the dust. So I think when I get baptized, it washes that dust off and I get to come out new, And I was like, 100% exactly right. And this experience of the flood was God, even though it was so, I'm sure, because God wept. It was a terrible thing for him, but he allowed the earth and his people to kind of dust themselves off, right? And that we had the opportunity to be renewed. That it is a story of devastation, but it's also a beautiful story of renewal. What are your thoughts about that? About recognizing that the flood was still that it's both, right? It's both a tremendous story of loss, but it's also a story of new beginnings.
Like that's that is the Lord's plan. You know what I mean? That's always been his plan. It's always been one of making mistakes, but recognizing there's an opportunity there to repent and to be reconciled and to be renewed through the Lord, right? But that requires us to look to him, right? To use our agency to look to him. I think about, and I know that you and your husband have been reading the Book of Mormon. But I think about, when Nephi is presented with, the task of getting the plates, right? And the decision that he's given is, it's kind of like the flood. It's to take the life of Laban, and he kind of goes through this, processing what the Lord is asking him, right? And in doing so, he's like reviewing, just kind of talking. The Spirit is kind of working through him, you know what I mean? Reminding him that that the Lord has delivered him into thy hands. And the Nephi says, and I also knew that Nephi had Laban had sought to take away my life, and that he would not hearken to the commandments of the Lord. Right? This is no different than Noah, right? These are people who wanted him to take his life, and they would not hearken to the commandments of the Lord. And so then the Spirit says to him again, slay him, for the Lord hath delivered him into thy hands. Behold, the Lord slayeth the wicked to bring forth his righteous purposes. It is better that one man should perish than that a nation should dwindle and perish in unbelief. I think about that, you know what I mean? And I think, yeah, this was one man, right? But he saves a nation through Noah and his family, right? And it was better that these people perish You know what I'm saying? There's just a lot of similarities there. You see, I feel like the Lord is consistent. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Yeah.
When Israel don't listen, he does it with them when they're in the wilderness. This is not new. You know what I mean? Maybe because of the scale on which the destruction took place, it's kind of like a big deal. But this is not new. This has been a pattern that the Lord has established from the beginning, right? Even in the pre-existence, he will then we're cast out, right? And we move forward with those who have chosen to obey his commandments. And so, I mean, I don't know. I see this, and I think it's one of the Lord's patterns. But I think the thing that really intrigues me is how people got to that point, right? And I wonder, would I make the cut to be on Noah's Ark? Right?
Yeah. Right.
What
Right.
what is happening in my world that I am not keen to? You know what I mean? What might I be missing? And Maxwell's words really hit home when he talks about it's an agency destroying point. You know,
Yeah.
think about the tools that have been provided technology wise. I mean, AI has been an amazing tool, but I just saw a study not too long ago that said that that students are learning less now than they have in years past
Yeah.
because of their reliance on AI, right?
Yeah.
I feel like there's something about that that is important to be aware of.
Yeah.
Use social media to get your information and your news. You know what I'm saying? Um, we have to make sure that we are doing our due diligence. Even when I see some of these podcasts and these come follow me's, there's always that reminder that this is not to replace your
Yeah.
own personal scripture study, right? Like
Yes.
we need to remember that we need to make good choices, because the more we allow these things to kind of become a habit, we lose then that ability to choose. We become shackled, right? We become prisoners. Anyway, not really sure if that's adding to the conversation, but just really intrigued and also just deeply grateful of such a mindful God.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it is because I think you wonder, so like you said, what led them to get so far off? What got them, so far off that path, right? And I think you're right. I mean, especially now, um, in my in healthcare world, one of the things that we always talk about is verify and validate and verify, right? It's like we can hear, people start doing processes or say this sounds great, but let's validate and verify, because sometimes it's just a great idea, but is it the right idea, right? And so it's that same thing. We watch podcasts or we read books, and they're great, but have we validated and verified the source in which they are speaking to us, about that information? I remember this was several years ago, in a sacrament meeting. Sister got up and she was bearing her testimony, and I was not really listening. I'll be honest, I was being bad. I was, kind of, and she was just crying and weeping and just so grateful for the testimony that she received. And I was assuming it sounded like she was talking about the Book of Mormon, and just the lives, the testimonies, the faithfulness of the people that she was reading about. And I'm sitting there and I'm listening, and I finally realized she is talking about the work and the glory, the books. And I went, that's not real.
Right.
It's just like, oh, okay. And I mean, and I, and I mean, because she was crying, and I love those books. They are
Right, right,
beautiful,
right,
and
right.
they're not actually real. Those aren't real people. I mean, they input like Joseph Smith and
Right.
those, some historical facts in there, but I'm like, I kind of was like, read the Doctrine and Covenants, sister. I was being judgy. I'd like to apologize. But it's like you said, it's like, are we, and that's Satan, right? I mean, love this, sister. I'm not, but
Right.
but that's what he does. Mo and I were talking about, because when we were looking at, because we were reading Second Nephi, and it refers to this Adam and Eve, and it talks about Satan being the serpent of lies, or god of lies, right? And that he was, that he and so, but then it talks about what he said, right? He the things that he he tells Eve, and he says that we will be like gods, that we will know good from evil, and so we're reading it, and I stopped and I said, Dad, all that stuff's true. I went, all of that is true. Everything that he said was true. And Mo goes, and so we sat and we looked at it, and we are like, well, what's the lie?
Right.
And we realized the lie was that surely you will not die.
Right.
You will become as, so the lie was that they wouldn't die. It was one little lie, but it was significant, right? Because they didn't realize that not only would they die, but they would be separated from God. And that's significant, right? But Satan, man, everything else he said was correct. But the one
Right.
lie was that they would not surely die, because they would surely die.
Right.
And they did, right? And not
And
only
this,
did they die, but they had to leave. But
yeah,
it still was part of the plan, and we're grateful for that choice, right? But that's how he works. It's
right.
that little bit, and it's hidden. So that became kind of our new thing this week when we were talking. We'd sit there and talk, and then we'd go, what's the lie? My husband goes, Mom, what's the lie? What's the lie?
Right.
You know, and I think that's the goal, is as we hear these things, and we hear all these things from the world or from other places, it's like, man, we might hear a lot of truth, but where's the lie? And make sure we are clear in making sure, is it all purely truth? If it is, then man, it's of God. But if there is a hidden lie, then we need to be aware of that, and then pivot back to the Lord, return back to the Lord.
Well, that's where your verify and validate come in, right? Because that is his method, is that he mixes his lies with truth. Right. And this is where we really need to do our due diligence. I was reading something the other day, and it was saying that that it's not enough to just have knowledge. We have to couple that with intellect, and intellect is light, right? And because the powers of evil also have knowledge, they actually have a lot of it, but they don't have intellect, they don't have that light, right? So it becomes really important that we look to that source of intelligence, we look to that light, we look for that spirit of truth, we look for the Holy Ghost, because that is the only way we'll be able to truly discern the truth from the lies. And when we stop looking to that, that's when we will be defeated,
Yeah.
right? That's when we will lose. And so and I think that's what happened with the Tower of Babel,
Yeah, I was
right?
gonna, that's perfect transition to that
Right.
story, right? And I love that, in the reading, it actually helps us. It talks about comparing the people of the Tower of Babel to Enoch, in the city of Enoch, because truly their goals were the same.
Right.
Both people wanted to get to God, right? They both had a desire to be with God, but they definitely followed two different paths, right? You know, 100, right? But ultimately, they were trying to do the same thing, but they obviously decided to do it different ways. Um, and so looking at what what was that downfall of the people of Babel, right? And the story, that story is found in let's see. Oh my goodness. Genesis, I apologize. Genesis
You're good.
11, 1 through 9. Let's read their little story. What, and it's not a little story, it's pretty darn significant. We know that in the Book of Mormon, we get to hear of people that were there. And this is, and just so you know, one of the things we came to realize, oh, who's Baya?
Oh, sorry, I just got
Say hi.
just a nephew.
Yay. Come say hi.
Sita.
Hello, handsome.
Yes.
But you know, so these are, you know, we know that the story of the brother of Jared, the Jaredites, come from this time, right? And this is like Mo and I kind of opened the Bible and looked at the chronology, you know what I'm saying, the timeline. And so this all happened about 9,000 years before Christ. 9,000 years. So I didn't realize that that's how much earlier the Jaredites were on, came to the continent before Nephi, like Lehi and Nephi, because they come 600 BC. So I'm like, this is a lot longer, a lot earlier, right? But do you mind? Let's read that story because it's fun to see. Well, not fun, but yeah, let's just read it and kind of talk about it. Sorry. Do you mind reading that again? Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through 9.
Okay. And where do you want me to read to?
If do you mind reading all 9 verses?
Oh,
Is
yeah.
that
1 through 11.
yeah, 1 through 9?
Okay.
It's Genesis chapter 11, verses 1 through
1
9.
through Okay. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick, and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city.
Okay.
Therefore is the name, oh,
No, keep going. I apologize. Yeah.
therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth.
And so why did the Lord, why was the Lord frustrated? And I think he shares that a little bit in, I want to say oh my gosh, verse 6. I,
6,
I think
right.
I think it's
Yep.
6. Go ahead and read that and tell me your thoughts about what made the Lord frustrated about them building this tower.
And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language. And this they begin to do, and now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do.
Yeah. So what was his fear about this people?
Um, I mean, my best guess is that what they were doing, um, well, what I feel like they were doing obviously wasn't good. And I mean, if he continued to let them to do it, then nothing would be restrained from them.
Yeah. Like I agree. I think he's like, these people have one voice, right? They're building this huge city because they want to conquer everybody else. They want to be the people. And if they get this power, nothing will be able to restrain them. And this happens like the, what am I saying? So Noah has already occurred, that Noah's happened, Noah's children have come, they've scattered on the earth. This, I don't think this is more than maybe, because back then 1,000 years, nothing, people lived till be 800 years old, right? But this, I think, is only maybe one generation, a couple generations past Noah. And so he's like, oh my gosh, they're doing it again. And he realizes if he allows them to stay strong, like have one voice, I mean one language, have the power that this city is going to be built on, that corruption's going to happen again. And he's like, I can't let it happen again. And again, that's a mercy, a tender mercy.
Tender
And he's
mercy.
like, and so he says, and he doesn't want to destroy them. Like, I think he's like, I can't kill my kids. Like, don't make me do that again. But he finds a different way to break their plan, right? And that is to take away their language. And it says, because they take away the language, the building is left, right? It says, so the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. The city is kind of left in ruins because they can't even talk to each other, right? And again, I mean, it sounds harsh, but it really is a merciful God who, like you said, I loved how you said that he intervenes in order for his children to be able to have space to grow and be right, to live the gospel, you know. I mean, he's so cool. I don't know. I think we hear these stories, they sound so mean. Like people talk about God, this fire and brimstone kind of God. But as we, like you said, unpack it, we see the love and mercy of a father who is hurt by the choices of his children. But he's like, how can I get them to be humble again? How can I help them to get back to remember me, right? Um, when we last week when we learned about Enoch, one of the beautiful things that he weeps when Enoch, he shows the vision to Enoch, and while he's watching, he's weeping, and Enoch's like, why are you crying? And he says, because I created them. They were my creation, but they would not do two things, which was, I asked them to do only two things, which was to love one another and to choose me, right? And they didn't do that, right? And same thing here. He's like, can you please love each other? Can you choose me? And they're not. So he intervenes again in such a merciful way. Like, you know what I mean? He could have burned down the tower. He could have done a
Right.
lot of, but he just, like he said, I'm no longer going to allow you guys to communicate with each other. And the one thing they didn't want happened.
Right. Right.
They did not want to be scattered. And
They didn't want to be scattered. Right. Right.
the very
Right.
thing that they hope for to not happen is exactly what happens, which I
Right.
shouldn't be funny, but I do think it's
No, for sure. Well, and I mean, there's a reference in that particular part of the Come Follow Me back to the Book of Mormon and Helaman, right? And it says that the same being who put it into the hearts of the people to build a tower sufficiently that they might get to heaven, it was Satan who put it in their hearts to build a tower. You know what I mean? And that's obviously where they went wrong, right? Kind of like you were talking about. It reminds me of the story of Cain and Abel, right? Both offering sacrifices, but Cain was doing it because he was listening to Satan. You know what I mean? And that eventually led to his downfall. And it's the same thing here. The two things that you refer to, to love the people, and there's an implication here that there wasn't a love for people because who was building the tower?
oh, it was slaves.
Right,
That
right,
they had conquered cities around that they
right,
were building. They were building it themselves.
right. Right. Do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah,
there was this lack of love for one another, and then also, they weren't heeding to the Lord, which was just the opposite of what Enoch was doing. In
yeah,
fact, the Utah area presidency, our area presidency here, they at the beginning of every year they put out a letter and they talk about the goals that they want to have for the area. And in the letter that our Utah area presidency put out, that there was this message, and it was essentially saying this is the message, right? Everything else takes a backseat to this, but they were like, the priority is the people, the purpose is the people, the plan is the people. and and then they were talking about, they had this little grid, and on the grid they would have, they say put the name of the person, and then put what is the next ordinance that they need, and
Yes.
then come up with the plan, to love, share, and invite,
Yeah.
right? And you see that this building that they were building is like the opposite of like the Lord's house,
Yeah.
right? Which is the epitome of all of the ordinances, where we can go to get the epitome of all those ordinances, right? That the Lord has for us. And the way, like you were saying, that they were going about doing it, so opposite of the way Enoch did it, right? He did it with an eye to the Lord. And I really think, obviously the story here for both is that they forgot the Lord,
Yeah.
right? And
Right.
that's an ongoing theme also, throughout all the generations.
Yeah.
We're getting to that point now where these succeeding generations are forgetting the Lord, you know, and everything around us kind of, you know, makes it easy to forget him and lean on our own arm of flesh, thinking that we are truly uh, greater than we really are.
Because
And
of the ease in which we can do things, right? Due to the ease in which, whether it's AI, whether it's just access, all the things, we forget that um, God's efforts is an effort, right? And we have to be willing to make that effort, whatever way we need to make sure God is our focus. Um, and man, I feel bad because there's so many times where Mo's like, "Hey, let's go visit someone." I'm like, I was like, but he, because he needs to go, and he goes, and he always invites me to go, and I'm like, what is so hard for me to get up? And it's like, it's we just have to, if we keep him in mind, keep God in mind, everything, it he yeah that's where the joy comes. And sure enough, when I go, I love it. I have a wonderful visit for whoever we went, and it was worthwhile, and I get the blessings as along with the opportunity to serve someone else. And it's just, but our lives are sometimes so easy, and such easy access, we forget that sacrifice brings blessings, right? And putting him first brings so many blessings. Um, and like you said, choosing who we all want the same goal, but who are we choosing to listen to get there, right?
right.
What voice are we hearing?
Right,
Yeah.
right, right. Well, and especially in these last days. So there was a reel that I saw not too long ago, and I was really moved by it. A gentleman is talking about an activity that their young women did, and they invited the fathers to come with them. And what they would do is they would walk into a wooded area with their daughters and their leaders, and the instructions that were given to them was that their daughters would be blindfolded. And the fathers would put their hands on their daughter's shoulder and kind of lead them. But the only things that they could tell them were these three instructions. And the instructions were, I will always be there. You can ask me anything, and you should listen for the sound of my voice. Those were the only three instructions that they could, those are the only things that they could say to their daughter on repeat. Right. So they walk into this wooded area, and they're guided by a guide. And so the fathers are telling this over and over and over again to their daughters. And then at one point, the guide tells them to take their hands off of their daughter's shoulders. They could keep talking, but they weren't to touch them. And so they took their hands off, and they'd continue to talk to them. And as they get deeper into the wooded area, the guide again told them they needed to be quiet, you know. And so then the guide would kind of guide the girls, and he said he was watching his daughter. And at one point, the guide guided her right into a ditch. And so he's standing there and he's looking at his daughter. She's blindfolded. She's in this ditch and she can't see anything, you know, doesn't know where she's at. And then he says he hears four words that just changed him. And he hears his daughter's voice say, "Dad, are you there?" You know, and he's like, "I am here. I am here," you know. And I think, especially in as the world gets darker, I
Mhm.
think it's important for us to recognize those three things. He is always there. Sometimes we will find ourselves in circumstances that may or may not have been by our choice, right? And he may not, answer our prayers the way that we want him to, but if we will look for his hand, we will see his hand in our daily lives, and we will know that is a sign of him being present, that he is aware of you and that he knows what you're going through, but also recognizing that this is part of your proving, right? I think that Irene gave a beautiful talk on proving, and he talks about how proving is not a test of perfection, but it's to strengthen you, and that can only happen by adding pressure to you, right? And as that pressure is added, your true nature will be revealed.
Yeah.
And I think about that. I think about that, and I think about some of the pressures and some of the challenges. And there are many times where I'm like, Lord, are you aware what's going on down here? I'll see some little tender mercy. It doesn't change anything in my circumstances, but it does let me know that He knows what's going on. You know what I mean? And my job then is to choose whether I will stay the course, right? And trust in the process, right? Because this is what this is all about, right? This is a process. This is the process of growing, of living, of learning to really trust in the Lord and who He is and who He says He is, and so I think about that a lot. I think about, what is it that we are choosing, and recognizing that these challenges that are taking place around us, it's not because we're bad people, but it's because the Lord sees our potential.
Yeah.
Uh, and if we will lean on Him, um, uh, we too, I think, will come to appreciate the potential that we have. And that only happens because He saw it first, right?
Yeah.
Just like He loved us first. And
Yeah.
so, you know,
100%. And that, like you said, it doesn't mean that it gets any easier or that struggle goes away, but we know in whose direction we are following, right? I mean, Noah and the brother of Jared both made those decisions to follow his voice, right? Follow his direction. Did they have it easy? Neither one. No, they both of them struggled. Both of them lived in a boat for several, for a long time, did
right,
things that were hard and difficult and were isolating, yet the blessings that came for by staying the course and trusting God's direction versus the world's direction is what saved their families. Not, I mean, not,
right,
it could, and ultimately, isn't that the story? It's about a father, two fathers saving their children, right? And saying, how can you keep our families together? That was the brother of Jared's ask. That was Noah's ask, right? And God said, I have, I've, you are found favor to me, right? And he gave them a path. And if he will do it for them, he's going to do it for us. As we look at our own children and whether whatever struggle or whatever that we as parents can say, help me keep us together,
right,
and then he will direct us. And it's not an easy course, as we all know as parents, right? But if we stay the course, follow him, um, he gets us through whatever that storm might be, even if it floods the world.
yeah,
We get renewed at the end if we trust that
yeah,
that's what the process is going to bring us to, right? Man, Linda, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. It was
Thank
wonderful to
you.
talk about these two amazing stories that aren't so far fetched anymore, right? Think we get it. We get it. And
Yeah,
maybe helps us prepare for what we know is going to be coming, right? Not going to be a flood, but it's definitely a change in the world. And are we going to be
yes,
prepared for that? Are we, like you said, are we going to be able to get on the ark? Are we going to be there in the morning or that first resurrection? Are we going to be
yes,
there? That's our goal, right? And love that he gives us these beautiful treasures to help us know how we can be there, right?
absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you again. Family, we're excited to continue to be able to do this and meet with more family members. We love you all, and again, thank you, and hope you enjoy your readings as well as you read with your families this week's Come Follow Me. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. Oh goodness.